By 1982, the Texas Instruments 99.4A was entering a golden age. With a fully outfitted system, a peripheral expansion box, 32K memory expansion, disk drives, and an RS-232 interface for printers and modems, this humble home computer could be just as productive and fun as the big guys. There was a world of powerful applications like the multi-plan spreadsheet and the TI Writer word processor. Complex code and multiple chained programs could load from Extended Basic. The editor-assembler package opened up high-level programming languages and relatively blazing speed to home coders. And games could be bigger, brighter, faster, and smoother than ever. The only problem was, most 99ers never saw a bit of it. There was a big gulf between what you could do with a bare console and what the more expensive add-ons could deliver. TI's big gamble was that people would cut their teeth on the inexpensive base unit, get restless, and invest in a full-on heavy metal workstation to become a power user. And as we all know now, that's a bet Texas Instruments lost spectacularly. Inventive and economical home users made do with their cassette drives and cartridges, or just moved on to other systems. And the people who did take the plunge and write software for the top end of the market found themselves without enough customers to really make a go of it. How big was that divide? Well, the first game up today is Asteroids by Bill Buys. It was released in 1982, written in assembly language, and it's barely mentioned in the TI world. I didn't even know it existed until a few months ago. Like his Centipede clone, Arthropod, and his most famous game, the Zaxxon knockoff Arcturus, Asteroids stays mostly faithful to the game it's imitating, but there are a few crucial differences. The enemy saucers don't collide with the asteroids, and the controls are super touchy. This is by far the fastest paced of the three games on display today, almost recklessly so. It takes a while to get the hang of that speed, especially if you've been playing slower basic-based games for a while. The hyperspace function, the smaller enemy saucer in higher levels, and the way the asteroids break down when you shoot them are all close to the arcade version. In fact, I'd say this is the most authentic of the three, and the one you're most likely to load in for a quick adrenaline jolt, even if it is relatively colorful, and the asteroids are a solid color. It may have more in common aesthetically with the Atari 2600 version than the vector-based graphics of the arcade original, but as far as the feel goes, this one here is the closest thing you're going to get to the cabinet. Ring Destroyer by Republic Software took a novel approach in 1981. The game loads from cassette or disc, and it does require Extended Basic, But if you have the 32K memory expansion, it effectively enhances itself with assembly language subroutines. Ring Destroyer doesn't have levels per se. When you get down to one asteroid on the screen, a new one shows up to add itself into the mix. The presentation is pretty minimal, and the closest to the arcade original in the sparseness of the screen design. It feels a lot less frantic than the previous game, but it's still a test of reflexes, with a tiny red enemy ship and no break from the steady onslaught of space rocks. Your ship handles completely differently than in Bill Byes' game. You accelerate more slowly, but you turn fast as hell. And while you can fire relatively quickly, you can only shoot one bullet at a time. I mean, it's probably not a bullet, but you know what I mean, a space bullet. Meanwhile, the smaller rocks vary in speed, but they can be blazing fast, and they careen off in all kinds of directions when you shoot one and it breaks into smaller pieces. It's weird how this can be an obvious port of the same arcade title, retain so much of the identity that Asteroids has, but feel like a completely different experience. This game's pretty colossal, and I like both of these a lot so far. They take different and individualistic approaches to an iconic formula, and they both go to cool and different places with it. And how about that nice opening screen, huh? In the early days of scarce RAM, it was always a treat to see someone go all out when they had a little extra room to work. And speaking of extras, over in the UK, Harlequin and Parco Electrics were like, assembly language? Who needs it? We're going to bang out one of the slickest looking Asteroids clones in Extended Basic without memory expansion, make it big and brash and colorful, and we're going to add a theme song and a fancy font too. Rockstorm is one of the better XB games I've seen. Like our previous contenders, it does take some liberty with the gameplay. You have to catch a target before your ship can fire missiles. You can only fire one shot at a time, and you can't steer or move while your shot is in flight. And then there are the rocks? I mean, does it sort of defeat the purpose of the name Rockstorm to turn the rocks into big colorful TI logos and questionably sourced intellectual property from other games? Probably, but who cares? It looks neat as hell. Like most XP sprite games, the collision detection is a little, squishy, and the control response isn't perfect either. But it's a lot better than most games like this. They dialed everything in to where you can kind of develop a strategy and work with the limitations as features. And if your shots go right through a target once in a while, that's kind of just the tax you pay for sometimes not blowing up when you hit a rock, or asteroid, or flying trash can that turns into a misshapen Cubert thing. Seriously though, I'm so glad this game is great because the presentation is top notch and it would have been a huge letdown if it had sucked. How often does a 16K game offer up a logo title screen, a fancy font, a hilarious high score table, and music. The copyright date on this one is 1985, and I hate to think how poorly it probably sold in England after they pulled out all the stops like this. I could see this being somebody's big last-ditch production, using every trick in the book they'd learned in a few thankless years of TI coding in the UK, before hanging up their spurs and slinking off to the greener pastures of the Commodore 64 or the ZX Spectrum. Whatever the circumstances, I'm grateful that we got Rockstorm 2, and I am delighted by all three of these unique takes on Asteroids. For a game that seemed to miss the boat on official home conversions, apart from the blocky old 2600 cartridge, the timeless simplicity of breaking rocks in a vacuum was a task the TI-99/4A was clearly up for, and probably better handled by our intrepid indie coders anyway. Thanks for the hard work, guys, and may I say, you rock?